election policies, John. So basically, is this a policy that you feel is needed? And what should be some of the key aspects of the policy?
Elections are, listen, we're in annual meeting season now. So maybe that's why it was on my mind. Virtually every time I go to an annual meeting, I have to explain that, like, the bylaws don't mention hardly anything that you do at an election. So then how do you run it? And the answer, I try to give is the board actually has broad authority to do what they think is reasonable, as long as it doesn't conflict with the bylaws. But again, if the bylaws don't mention it, there's rarely going to be a conflict. So, like, what is a reasonable measure? And I actually think most associations ought to have written election policies. This way, when people challenge it, they could say, well, we're following a reasonable policy. Here's what it is. I think it would be a great idea. And I think that's a big hole that I see in elections. That's why when you mentioned it, I was like, really, yeah, some written election policies would be a good idea.
Stacey, yeah, it sounds kind of crazy not to have an election policy down in writing.
I think that one of the biggest issues that I always come up with regard to election is, what do you do if you don't have a quorum to actually hold your election? And a lot of owners don't realize, or a lot of boards don't realize, that in a lot of the bylaws, there is a provision that will allow a board, based on, it's usually the unit owner vote of the owners present, that they can actually adjourn the meeting, which would in turn give them additional time to get votes, and also will lower the quorum requirement to a lower percentage, which will help them turn over the board. Because I see a lot of times, and I hear a lot of times, that owners boards are saying, well, no one wants to run for the board, or we couldn't get a quorum, so we just sat for another year, even though we didn't want to. And I think that boards get fatigued when they have to sit on a board for another year when they didn't anticipate it. And I think that's something that people should really study their bylaws to make sure that that's in there. And if it's not, maybe do a policy. If it's not in there, you could do it by way of a board resolution, because it's absent, not conflicting. So that's an issue that I would think would need to be in an election policy.
Gregg, elections are a big lawsuit factor in our industry, right? Is that reasonably?
Yes, we see challenge elections, lawsuits.
So
having written policies and procedures in place is definitely going to help defend what you were doing and why you did it. It was reasonable. You've been doing it for years. You were consistent in how you would follow these procedures and policies. So John and Stacey's suggestions are really good.